What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. And today we are here to preview Lions Bengals. Not in the usual studio, but I still want to get this video out, so I'm going to record it anyways. Lions Bengals, big favorites on the road, so let's get right into it. The injury side of things, the biggest news is, of course, Joe Burrow not playing this game. Seems like he's going to be out for a while, which has led Cincinnati looking pretty rough offensively. They had a Minnesota game 2 weeks ago. They scored 10 points. Didn't look like they could find any kind of success on early downs. And then this past week against Denver, while they moved the ball, especially on the first drive, they kept stalling out in short yardage situations. They couldn't put up points. So it's been a little rocky. I think last week was a step forward for Cincinnati, but that said, they still didn't put many points on the board, so it still looked very rough overall. And in this game for the Lions, there is some potential really good news. It seems like Terrion's trending towards playing in this game as of now, full participation on Thursday, and Ali McNeil has a 50-50 shot to go, so it's on the table that he actually plays this week, which is kind of nuts, but it's on the table, and Kelvin Shepard said if he does go, just rotate him in. We got 4 starting caliber interior defensive lineman. He was very hyped about what he looked like in practice, and then also Khalil Dorsey full participation. So it seems like he's also going to be available for this week where we're a little bit thin at cornerback without DJ Reed, but we're going to have some options. So with that being said, let's start first with this Cincinnati Bengals defense. More stated, there's not as much creativity maybe on some of the earlier downs, but of course when they get you in the third down, that's where they get pretty creative in terms of what they do in coverage. And I'll start with the run game first though, before we get to any of that, because to me, there's no doubt the Lions should run the ball well in this game. And I think there's going to be tons of flexibility to doing that. This is a below average run defense, but it's not even just the statistics. It's just seeing the different ways teams have been able to attack them. Earlier this week, I talked about the defensive ends and the cornerback position and making their secondary tackle, making their DNs make a play. I love our offensive tackles, and for their defensive ends, especially without having Shamar Stewart in this game, I don't feel like they're getting much penetration into the backfield. I feel like they're getting halted at the point of attack. You just don't feel a big impact there. When Demetrius Knight comes on the line and he comes on the ball, they put 5 across the front. You run towards the weak side right at him. Trey Hendrickson has a little bit there. I think Cam Sample has actually been their most disruptive run defender on the edge from what I've seen, but ultimately they're not great there. And then again, their defensive backs. I like Dax Hill's effort against the run, but as a whole, that's something I would test all game long. Cam Taylor-Britt got benched in his last game, so that's an area where with guys like Josh Newton on the outside, you look to put those guys in the run game specifically. Denver had like a 16-yard jet run just because their defensive backs took a terrible angle. At alone, first off, matchup-wise, I like that. On the interior, that's where they have, I think, much more capable, I would say more consistent pieces that can definitely get wins. That's not to say Hendrickson won't get wins, because he will. And again, Sample can too. I just feel consistent success there with our matchup. But on the interior, we're young, and they have BJ Hill, they have Purcell in the interior, who was with the Kansas City Chiefs at nose tackle. They have Chris Jenkins, who are rotating in a bit. So there are some flashing players in there, but again, that's just a matchup on paper. I think we should dominate across the board. You know, a lot of teams have success with the outside zone, which is kind of our staple of an offense, is when we get to that, specifically working the weak side runs, going to those techniques that are shaded inside of an offensive guard so you can have some leverage and get upfield, working at a guy like Demetrius Knight when they want to put him on the ball specifically. I think that leads to success. I think Knight does a lot of good in pass coverage, but run defense, he hasn't been dominant to this point. So I look for a lot of outside zone rushing. I look for some lead blocks, maybe what Denver did as well with some jumbo package, get an extra offensive line in the game, put another backer on the field. Inside zone has been pretty effective as well for teams just going straight at them. Again, make them tackle on the outside, pin pull looks, jet sweeps, those kind of things can be effective. Stretch runs have found success. I think across the board, there's a lot of ways the Lions can create movement, and wouldn't be surprised at all if the Lions were not overly flashy with how they did it. It was, hey, we're going heavy package, we're putting another offensive lineman on the field, we're putting a lot of tight ends out there, and you have to stop us, and we're going to push you backwards. I mean, the worst series it felt like watching opponents run the football was like back-to-back 3-yard runs, and even that's not terrible. I think the Lions are going to create a lot of movement in this game, and I think it's a must, because I think based on what they do in the back end, there's a heavy rotation between cover 3 and cover 6 from what I've seen so far, and for that reason, if you can really make them respect the run, which to this point, I think it's one area that Logan Wilson thrives for them at linebacker, is he does a great job at getting depth in zone coverage. If you can really make them respect that, that opens up another element that they do a pretty good job of taking away, which is those second level throws, and they force you to work underneath. So being effective on the run game, being effective on early downs rushing the football, I think rushing to open the pass this week is a perfectly acceptable way to go at the Cincinnati team, really dominate time of possession, keep them off the field ideally. I think is the best way that you want to play this. Then you can start to get a little more creative defensively, make Browning make a few mistakes in this game and not let him play as comfortable. But we'll get to that here in a second. Continuing now, let's go to some of their coverage looks. On first down, as John Morton stated, there's a lot of cover 3 and there's been a lot of cover 6 to this point. Now, some of that's dependent on who you're playing, of course, and situation based as well before the half, how soft are they going to play. But it's a lot of that. The big thing about for me with their cover 3 defense is they will definitely blitz out of it. And one thing that really we've seen through a couple of weeks now that teams have had to answer for is run-pass options. They've used bubble screens out of it. They've been able to get the ball out quickly and find explosives by just getting the ball out against here comes a slot blitz or here comes an extra linebacker. They've been able to create explosives from that, just getting it out and making those guys tackle in the back end. I wouldn't be surprised Lions repped RPOs earlier this offseason if they try to dabble in that a little bit this game as well, just because it's seemingly been so effective against Cincinnati to this point. And that is one wrinkle I think Cincinnati has shown is simulating pressure, right? Here comes the slot. Maybe that's Dax Hill. We'll drop out Trey Hendrickson. That's one thing that's felt pretty creative with them with a lot of those cover 3 looks. There's an occasional Tampa 2 will get mixed in, playing pretty soft over top, but a lot of times it's a mix between those two. Cover 3, you want to think, hey, high-low those routes. We saw Minnesota, their first big completion was that when Carson Wentz connected over the second level. The problem is their linebackers play with a lot of depth. Logan Wilson finds routes really well. I think if you want to go at somebody, you go at night, get him out into the flats. Overall in this game, I think you attack the flats a lot. I mean, outside of if they're playing cover 6 and, whatever that flat side is, even then they're going to carry the route probably. St. Brown, if you put him on the outside, he might grab that kind of attention from them. So that opens up the flats a lot in this game. I think you have to feed them, and you have to be willing to. Just be willing to take what's there. I understand you want the explosive, but truly, if you're going to open up that second level throughout the game, you have to be willing to just take what's underneath and let David Montgomery and Gibbs go. They are elite pass-catching backs. Just let them be elite in their game. You don't have to analyze that with some of these play-action looks. If they're going to continue to get depth and just clog up the middle, obviously run the ball, but specifically, let them do what they do after the catch. And I think that's perfectly fine in this game. I like the wrinkle that we saw with Minnesota where they put Thielen at running back. That was creative. It kind of created an issue in terms of spacing. They scored their touchdown out of that cover 3 look. Like they were able to create some spacing mismatches and advantages there by changing up where their personnel was aligned at. So maybe a little bit of St. Brown in the backfield. But ultimately, that's kind of the overarching theme, I think, of how you go at this. When they do go to that cover 6 look, and we'll see this on second and long specifically, we'll see this plenty. Some quarters gets mixed in. Maybe they'll go buzz depending on how long it is. But this is where I also look at there is a way to attack this. It's not that they're just playing so far deep and it's like, oh, there's nothing over top. You're kind of playing a game where they're going to clog the middle, but they're going to give you level 3 routes. Assuming they play it like they played to this point this season, I think you have to stretch the deep middle third of the field. Like you have to attack that. They're going to split their safeties. One's going to give attention on the backside. The other one's going to help over top of one. You have to be able to split the middle of the field. And clearly Lions have the guy to do that. And JMO and Khalif, Sam Laporta potentially, but really the speed guys. Those open up. And Denver had a chance last week, and Troy Franklin didn't come down with it. But they give you that opportunity. You can see it create wide open through the deep middle of the field. So maybe they don't run that as much. Maybe they keep it closed a little bit more. I would think you'd play that way because I do think if they play soft and they give us those middle of the field shots, Goff will take that, and he'll be willing to live underneath. With the way that they play cover 3 when you're backed up, like cover 3 buzz, it opens up the checkdowns for Jared Goff to just kind of live underneath. I would think they're going to live into more cover 3 sky looks. Keep a safety in the box, work him into the flat, try to force him to go underneath, force him to make checkdowns and limit explosives. I would think that's going to be their strategy overall in this game. Now that said, though, they do have a wrinkle of 3 match coverage. And if you are getting that from Cincinnati, I do think that's a really good opportunity to attack, again, the slot positions. You can get safeties on receivers in those matchups. You can find Geno Stone. A real opportunity, kind of bending 4 verticals, working between the safeties. When they go match coverage, high red zone, that kind of thing, it opens up opportunities to get better matchups than a cornerback on a receiver because they're essentially inviting you to do that, trying to take away the explosives and the vertical routes. It makes me think of last year. I think Jacksonville did that a little bit, and it kind of gave up big-time explosives where they seemingly covered everything, but it also kind of let our receivers shine in terms of like, okay, our guys are just winning, and Goff is putting the ball in a really good spot. So even though they're in a spot where it's not like wide open windows, we kind of just feel like we're dominating in the pass game. I think this game has the potential to look like that. Now, that's not to say they're terrible in coverage. Again, they bench Cam Taylor-Britt, which I'm assuming we'll see him more this week. Newton comes in. Then you also have, outside of that, Dax Hill, who I do like a little bit. I think DJ Turner is kind of their most consistent man coverage piece, specifically when you look at the cornerback spot. But overall, I don't think it's great. And then at the linebacker position, they do so much zone where they're not really typically getting matched up one-on-one with the running back. So when you think about getting into some of those third down situations, again, you get third and long, they're going to kind of keep things in front. This is where they do get creative. We saw a nice little cover 4 disguise that was very effective. That's where they start to move around their pieces. Again, you may get more simulated pressure in those spots as well, where it's still only a 4-man rush, but they're just bringing it from a few different spots. You get a little bit more of that sense of kind of the Baltimore Ravens vibe. But overall, they still play a lot of things in front of them when they do it if you backed up on 3rd and long situations. So it could open potential screens underneath. I don't love screens on early downs from what I've seen so far because the linebackers play pretty well in space. So I think if you work running back and tight end screens, it's not as effective. More so to me, getting them out into flats where they have to go chase to the sideline. And then on top of that, if you are going to run screens, run it to your receivers, get them out wide, get them towards the numbers a little bit more than kind of playing in that confined, near the hashes. I don't think you want to play that game as much if you're going to go to this screen route a bit in this one. If you do go shorter yard situations, they tend to kind of match up a little bit more consistently. A little bit more cover 1 feels like it gets mixed in. 3rd and short, we've seen that. We get some cover 3 looks, which again, 3rd and medium spots where you can open up some spacing. I expect fast motion spots, creating spacing underneath. Again, taking what they're giving you, just creating space, not really having to climb to the second level, but maybe giving that threat to back guys up and just go underneath of it. But really, they're going to give you some man coverage in those short yardage spots. So pick plays can be there. That can open up as a real opportunity in this game, specifically running away from people in coverage. If Josh Newton's out there, I say you just run away from him. I don't think he's shown that great of speed, and I think that he may have trouble sticking with some of our guys as routes develop a bit. If you're going to work a guy like DJ Turner, he's a little bit undersized. You got to work him at the top of the route. You got to be physical, separate at the top of the route, snap off deep comebacks, deep curls, out physical. Maybe that's where Isaac Tesla could flash a little bit if he could get that matchup specifically. Running the ball early and finding success rushing the football. And I really think they're going to find it. You may get a couple of negatives in there, but I think that we're more than good enough to have success against this team in a lot of different ways. If you make a guy like Mike Purcell run against outside zone or stretch zone, I think he's going to struggle. You go to the weak side, you go at Chris Jenkins, you can go at BJ Hill a ton. That's what I think was Minnesota did, just going at BJ Hill. Like, you're going to have real opportunities there to create movement. You can go downhill, hold off those edges because they don't feel like they get upfield enough, so it doesn't feel like they're doing that. Even though I think they handle doubles pretty well, their edge defenders don't feel like they get upfield fast enough to actually make an impact. So slowly, it feels like you're kind of just knocking them backwards and you're really slowing down their linebackers at that point. And then again, you can get out to the numbers as well. If you want to get out there, be speedy. Level 1 and level 3, you may have a mix of taking what's there, boom, big shot play. Maybe not as much of the level 2 being open. If you get that open, I think you're in a great spot, but I don't think they're going to allow that. Do a lot of things which is dominate up front and win one-on-ones because they're probably going to get a lot of singled up matchups slot and outside based on how I think they're going to play because of our run game. So I think it could look like the Jacksonville game if our guys just win. And I think we're going to win. I really do. Like, watching Hawk, he got kind of held up a bit at times in coverage against these guys. I just don't see that happening with Laporta. So sometimes it could be just that simple, and we got to win once again this week. Flipping it to the other side of the ball, Bengals offensively, their pass concepts don't seem that deep, but there is a lot, well, I guess they are deep because there's a lot of vertical concepts attached, but they don't seem overly detailed in terms of like there's so much here that you have to deal with and you're going to be presented with. In terms of the run game, it's probably the most interesting element because I think it's been very effective, and as the coaches have talked about this week, it's effective because of the threats that they have at receiver. There's so much too deep coverage. There's so many light boxes. They're running against 6 and opens up so much success. They are a little bit heavier of a gap style team. I know so many teams now go zone, but they'll go a little bit more gap rushing, down block. And I think that's maybe what they lean into against us because we've had some problems with that. Also, they can try to minimize some of our impact of zone rushing for our D tackles that could dominate the matchups of Ted Karras and a rookie at left guard out of Georgia, Fairchild, or at right guard, right, where, you had Jalen Rivers starting last week. Like, they may want to minimize that. So I can see them trying to down block and just seal off and just try to get up to the next level, maybe with their tackles, their tight ends that they'll get involved a little bit. Again, they're a heavy 11 personnel team, but if they are trying to run, I think we're going to see a little more gap scheme. So it's going to come down to our backers blowing things up, like Derek Barnes did last week. Don't be surprised if you put him off the ball a little bit to blow things up. Let him blow things up. And then also, again, our defensive end is kind of dominating. And this is a matchup that I think they can as well. Like, I feel a good advantage here. Al-Quadri Muhammad, Aiden Hutchinson specifically against Mims and Orlando Brown. Like, I like those matchups on both sides. I'm confident with those matchups on both sides coming into this game. So ultimately there, we got to get over top of some blocks because if we get sealed off cleanly, we could give up explosives. But ultimately, I think that's probably what they're going to lean into a little more. But there is some real versatility there. Outside zones have been pretty effective to them. Inside zones, not as much. I don't think they create as much movement consistently. And, they'll get some negatives working towards the edges a bit as well. And the concepts aren't overly creative, but there's a lot of deep corner routes, a lot of deep posts, and a lot of deep curls. But the ball gets out fast in the sense of there's definitely examples where he'll hold the ball and take a sack or throw an incomplete, broken play. But in terms of recognize like where he wants to go with it, that feels very quick. It doesn't feel like Browning takes a long time to be like, I'm going to throw it at that guy. On opportunities, the ball a lot of times goes to T. Higgins because a lot of teams are bracketing in, especially on second and third down, Jamar Chase, right? Cover 6 or 2-man or cover 1 Robert, and they're just rolling him over the top and they're bracketing him in and they're saying somebody else beat us. And a lot of times that becomes T. Higgins. And if he sees that, the ball's immediately coming out. And whether it's DPIs big receptions or an incomplete pass, that they're going to live with that. The problem for them, I think, has been third and short situations. They haven't had clean answers, and it still turned into that game, and that's not consistent, right? That you can hit some of the big plays, but it's not consistent enough to live on that in third and short. And I feel like they've tried to, and they haven't to this point. But I do think they'll run a lot of 11 personnel just to try to put 3 DBs on the field for us, knowing that we don't have Reed. Let's say Terrion plays and Meek plays. I think they'll try to do that to maybe get a guy like Maddox in the slot, or put a guy like Dorsey out wide and put a Meek in the slot. Like, I could see them trying to find a matchup where they feel like they have an advantage this week, because that's clearly their biggest advantage offensively, is just what they have at the receiver position. Single high coverage, you're going to get a lot of fade routes. Again, you're going to get a lot of deep curls from them as well, with a lot of backside dig routes that take a little bit to develop. Yosivash has been effective there. They've kind of used him on some of those backside digs. If you play a little bit softer coverage, 2 deep safety, cover 6, they tend to kind of open those up. And if you play a little softer, they'll go to some spot routes underneath. A lot of times, like a bunch, here's a spot route, and then there's a deep corner behind it. So it's kind of just a high-low. I think he's made some questionable decisions. He nearly threw a pick against Minnesota on, I think it was a 3rd down, where they brought basically everybody, went cover 3 blitz and brought everybody, and it was kind of jumped. He threw a spot route that wasn't there at all, but he just threw it anyway. Like that I think you can get Browning into some trouble because of how fast he'll make his mind up seemingly. And also on the flip side, how fast, like, it feels like he's not seeing maybe routes that are actually there. Like, I mean, there was a bootleg this season where he threw the level 3 route that wasn't open at all, but level 2 is wide open. But he already made a decision. He's putting it out immediately once he got the 1-on-1. I think it was for Chase, and it was broken up and incomplete. But he's going to give them chances. So you're definitely going to be attacked, and there's no doubt there could be a lot of flags in this game if you're too aggressive. Occasionally, you'll get some, like, heavy slant concepts on both sides, which, again, nothing really that deep there, but you'll get some of that as well. Again, that tends to be more effective against man coverage. That's tend to be when they kind of dial that in, not as much for the zone coverage stuff. Second and long spots, they definitely will throw some screens here. They'll go underneath. They'll use that screen bubbles, running back screens. I think this is where you get a little bit more of your let's get something kind of concepts, because you're getting like the Ohio concepts, and then you get, where you're getting out and a vertical on the outside. You're kind of just high-lowing one things. You'll get some curl routes here. You'll get some digs. Like, it feels like you're getting a little bit more of let's get positives on second and long. Let's run a little bit more of kind of a 2-man concept. We'll lean into that a bit. Playing in soft coverage, you may be giving one of those up unless you get into some like Tampa 2 or cover 2 where you can potentially high-low them and make a tight window throw. But otherwise, if you're playing pretty soft 6-4, you're probably going to give some things up there unless you then man or match up, which again, the ball is probably going to come out as a fade and he'll just throw the 1-on-1 to the outside. So that's what I would keep an eye on for that. Second and medium, this is where I think you're going to get more, riskiness from their offense. They're going to take some more shots, the corner post routes on the backside, right? Just kind of 1-2, put a safety in conflict. You get plenty of that. Fade routes, out corner dig routes, a lot of the vertical passing concepts come into play. When backed up in third and long, a lot of stuff is coming out underneath. They may run it, they may run a draw, they may run a screen, but they don't seem overly ambitious to actually push the ball down the field when they're backed up that far. So if you get them backed up in third and long, you should feel really good about your chances to get off the field. Second medium, again, it's probably just going to come out as a shot play, so you play some 2-man there. And then in the short yardage situations, again, I think they have too many vertical shots. I think there's too many vertical shots. I like heating them up. I like going cover 0, but because they're taking a vertical shot, it's kind of a win-lose, because like, okay, the ball's going to come out, but we know he's going to put the ball up anyway. So do we really need to do that if he's going to get the ball out that fast? So third and short, I'm sure the Lions will play it a little bit safer, but I have seen bringing a lot of bodies have been very effective against them, giving them plenty of different looks, having him set his eyes incorrectly like he did against Minnesota, where, he kind of had a different look in the back end. He set his eyes on the wrong side, didn't really see the drive on the backside, so he ends up throwing an interception on the broken play. Just making him think a little bit more than just kind of giving him the easy out to throw it up and let the receiver go in, because I think ultimately it's not really the game you want to play. I do think the positive is their O-line is going to struggle with stunts and games. They're going to struggle with that kind of speed up front. I don't think they match up well for that. I think their offensive line as a whole isn't great. Their interior specifically, Ted Karras, Fairchild, if Reisner's in there, but specifically Jalen Rivers, those are 2 rookies. Make those guys deal with speed, stunts, games up front. I think they struggle with that so far. This boy, and I don't think he's overly comfy in the pocket. He wants that ball out or he wants to go. And I think because that, bring linebackers, right, create confusion up front. It could only take 4 with simulated pressure and confusion in the back end, and I think that's a recipe for disaster for them. So that's why second and medium, probably going to be in a really good spot. And he may throw you a pick because you may just throw it up 1-on-1 to somebody if you can keep 2 deep safeties. But ultimately, you should be able to get some real pressure in this game by just running some sort of games up front in this game specifically. A lot of level 2 and 3 concepts, not a huge underneath passing attack. That's not really who they are right now, and the run game is kind of their underneath attack, and they'll set it up if you're playing back. So can you handle the run is the big question in this one. I think that the Lions will be fine against the run. I think Chase Brown could find some success, but dealing with the gap scheme is going to be the biggest challenge, especially if you don't have safeties working in the box. But I think the key is very clear here. make their receivers don't let them win the game with Chase and Higgins. If you make anything else beat you, I think you're fine. If they have to lean on the run to go score a touchdown, I think ultimately it's not going to be enough. That's the game I think you're fine with playing in this one. You want to kill time of possession. I think you can do that offensively. So for that reason, I think this could be dominant in the sense of time possession. I think it could be 40-20. And I think if that's the case, if that's the recipe, you're probably winning this game comfortably. So my initial prediction, I think, was 28-13. I think I'm going to stay in that range. I think it's going to rock with it. It sounds good. It feels good. Maybe I'll go 27-13. I like something like that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.